Wow. Welcome to End User Computing 301, Architecting for Workforce Agility with AWS End User Computing. I'm Jeff Ferris. I am the tech leader for End User Computing at Amazon Web Services. In my 7 years at Amazon, based out of Austin, Texas, I have not had a corporate asset for at least the last 5.5 years. I haven't used a VPN. I have solely used our end user compute services. So my co-speakers here.
Yes, hi, I'm Carla Blickensturfer, and I'm a member of the Worldwide Specialist Organization for End User Computing. And I've been at Amazon Web Services for about 5 years. I'm based in Dallas, Texas. And I've had various roles within the 5 years, and they've all been in end user computing. I started out in the partner organization as the North America End User Computing Partner Lead. And then I moved over to the sales organization for end user computing. And currently I'm in the end user computing go-to-market organization. Jason?
Hey everybody, my name is Jason Winters, and I'm a principal architect here at Maximus. For those of you who don't know who we are, Maximus people are obsessed with advancing the vital mission of our government partners. As a go-to for our strategic and operational partner to agencies, Maximus delivers innovation, efficiency, and scale to help governments perform at the speed of human need. Through our consulting technology, citizen services, we help to ensure the health, safety, security, and opportunity for the people governments serve. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much for coming out, especially at 6:15 in the evening. We really appreciate you being here, and we're excited to share with you more about architecting for workforce agility with Amazon End User Computing Solutions. So let me talk a little bit about the agenda. We're going to first of all start out and talk about some of the challenges that we've heard from customers about what they're facing in their end user computing in their companies related to end user computing, and then we're going to go through the AWS portfolio of solutions, just a high level, so that sets us up really well when Jason comes back and gives us a story about how Maximus is using AWS EUC solutions. And then we're going to turn it over to Jeff, and he's going to give us some exciting information and news about some of the things that we're doing and some of the things that are to come and some of the recent launches. So let's get started. Recruiting and empowering the modern workforce, I'm sure, as all of you have seen, it is the job for the entire company, from having HR involved to C-level, C-level leaders and people from every aspect of the business. What we're seeing, though, is that IT plays a super important role in this modern workforce. And some of our customers have talked to us about 3 major challenges. And the first one is this, okay, we have a more distributed and flexible workforce. And that's not news to anyone, as the world has changed, especially over the last couple of years. And working from home has really become a permanent part of how we're working and how that's going to move forward. In fact, Gartner did a survey and found that 82% of company leaders said that they would allow some form of working remotely in the near future, and that 47% said that they're already considering having their workforce not go back to offices. And so we know that working remotely, post-pandemic is still happening and will continue to happen. And so this is in addition to the trends that we saw even before 2020. We saw a distributed workforce even before the pandemic when we looked at how companies were doing mergers and acquisitions, how we were looking at the global supply chain, and then just, this shift to contingent workers and to this gig workforce. And so, what we have found is that there is this, that the workforce can be anywhere, and IT has to make sure that these people are empowered to work from their best spot on a moment's notice. The second challenge that we hear customers talk about is to improve productivity. Competition is getting tougher, and the cloud is accelerating competition as companies in every segment and industry are unleashing more innovation because of their migration to the cloud. Now, the bar is getting higher, and the one thing that we haven't heard from customers is they say that their employees are too productive. And so the third challenge that we are hearing from customers is that they can't compromise security and reliability. And with data becoming more digital and more powerful, coupled with highly distributed workforces, as we've mentioned, we have to really watch out for the bad guys because they're getting smarter and more dedicated. And even a single data breach can cost millions of dollars, and it can impact brands for companies that can last for years. So security is more critical than ever, and reliability is just a non-negotiable. If the workforce is down, then chances are your ability to deliver for your customers is impacted. So the cloud, the AWS cloud, the good news here is that the AWS cloud is really designed for these challenges. With workers working from home and the definition of the office becoming more nebulous, having the right tools in the right place is critical. Customers need to over-provision, or customers used to have to over-provision to ensure that they had enough capacity to handle their workforce operations at a peak level of activity. But the elasticity and the global availability of the cloud has allowed customers to provision the amount of resources that they actually need, and knowing that they can instantly scale up and down based on the needs of the demands on their company. AWS also enables customers to deploy globally in minutes. And how we do that is through our regions and our availability zones. So let me explain this. AWS, each region at AWS is a separate geographic area around the world where we have a physical presence. And within each region, we have multiple isolated locations, and we call those availability zones. And by using AWS, customers can leverage our 81 availability zones across 25 geographic regions worldwide, and you don't have to negotiate any real estate contracts or co-location agreements. AWS has continually been expanding our services to support virtually every cloud workload. You may have heard in the keynote earlier this week that we now have more than over 200 fully featured services related to storage and database, networking, analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and of course, end user computing. We also want to point out here too that the AWS Marketplace connects customers with more than 1,600 independent software vendors who help to meet the needs of our customers. And the AWS Cloud is designed as a pay-as-you-go approach pricing. So when you have this pay-as-you-go pricing approach, and you only pay for the individual services that you need for as long as you need them. So you don't get tied up in long-term contracts or complex licensing agreements. And once you stop using the services, there's no fees, there's no termination fees, if you're not using it, you don't pay for it. And so with this choice and with this freedom from the complex licensing agreements, it's easier to try and find the right application. And if something changes in your business and that application doesn't fit those needs, then you can change too. So, the last thing I want to touch on, about the cloud is probably the most important, and that's related to that we never compromise on security and reliability. Security is job number one at AWS, and it will always be the top priority. AWS has been architected to be the most flexible and secure cloud computing environment available today. And our core infrastructure is built to satisfy the security requirements for like military and global banks and some of our other highly sensitive organizations. And we use, the same secure hardware and software to build out each of our regions. And so our customers can benefit from that. And we, have, like I said, some of the most secure companies or people that have secure needs using the AWS cloud. So let's dive a little deeper with what we're seeing from a Pricewaterhouse COVID-19 remote work survey. When we looked at this survey, what we saw are some of the challenges from the pandemic and post-pandemic workplace. And of course, again, the biggest challenge being this distributed and flexible workforce. In 2020, we all needed to react quickly to shift to this work from home. And practically overnight, almost all of non-essential workers had to set up a home office, and customers had to rally to get employees up and running in a very secure environment in a very short period of time. And so some companies, had not done that before. And, now that we've all been doing this for over a year, this panic phase of work from home is kind of over, and vaccines are here, and we're starting to see adoption. And look, we're all in a room together at a conference, So what was kind of a reactive situation is now customers are looking at, what am I going to do long term? And so the conversations that we see in the workspace, what we're seeing here is that about 83% of the companies are going to move to a hybrid workforce. In fact, in that first statistic, 1 in 10 companies are deciding not to even, go back to an office and get rid of that real estate. And so that's kind of telling us to, where the future is going. And then on the other side, when we look at the spend, this really reflects it as well, because there's 70% of, in this survey reflected that there's investments that are being made into virtual collaboration tools, and 72% said that of these leaders said that they were going to increase their spend in virtual connectivity. So when we start seeing, how the customers are reacting to this distributed and workforce, what we want to do is to be able to help out in those situations, which is why I want to share with you a little bit more about our portfolio of products and services in this physical desktop and virtual application space. So in the AWS end user computing space, we have two solutions. Amazon Workspaces, which is our cloud native persistent desktop offering. And then we have AppStream 2.0, which is our cloud native non-persistent desktop offering. And it's also our streaming web services offering. And so, these services enable teams to securely access desktops and applications and data that they need to get their jobs done, no matter where they are. And with our end user computing services, we're designing this for this remote workforce and helping employees be able to work across time zones and organizations and across borders around the world. And when you have the agility to respond to changing your workforce and by being able to scale up and down with resources on demand, you can do all that without deploying physical infrastructure. And so our mission is to be able to help workers be able to work on any device, anywhere, at any time, to be able to get their work done. And so what we see with our Amazon Workspaces and Amazon AppStream 2.0 are really kind of 4 core benefits from security, agility, reliability, and cost savings. So let me start with the focus on security. Because like I said, everything we do starts with security. And our services are built on the AWS cloud, and we have over 200 security certifications. And so we are really focused on security-focused customers and wanting to make sure that we keep that as the top priority. We use different protocols. I mean, we encrypt this information over protocols, and the protocols that we use are PC over IP and NICE DCV and the Workspaces Streaming Protocol, or WSP. And that means that the data is not stored on the device, it's stored in the cloud. And so if, like, for example, a device is left in the back of a rideshare vehicle, you don't have to worry about your data loss or your data being compromised because it's in the cloud. Secondly, we increased agility. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier about how we have the ability to scale up and down, and sometimes at a moment's notice. I'm sure that some of you are familiar with that and having to maybe react immediately to needs in your company. And as you look at these solutions, we have these solutions rolled out on Linux and Windows desktops. And we can roll these out anywhere in the world in minutes. And this means that we can also provision applications sometimes quickly, well, not sometimes, but we can always provision applications quickly as well. And by doing this globally, we don't have, to worry about international data center contracts or agreements. Third, we focus on the reliability. If you're running VDI on premise today, you know that it's complex. And, the uptime for systems that you've built over the years, our customers get really excited when we tell them that these services are built with 99.9% uptime SLAs. And they understand the power of moving to the cloud. In fact, we're excited to see so many customers understand that the future of virtualization is in the cloud. And we've been doing this since 2014. And I think that, we would all agree that there's no compression algorithm for experience. And experience with Amazon and utilizing Amazon Workspaces and AppStream is something that we do even today for our own end user productivity needs. Fourth, we help you save money. And how we do this is because we run at scale in the cloud, we're able to keep the infrastructure costs low. And by doing that, we pass those savings on to you, the customers. And we have a range of compute instances and bundles that help you find the right level of performance for your specific use cases. And of course, it's a pay-as-you-go. So there's no need to worry about buying servers or licenses, and you only pay for what you use. And so what you don't use, you don't pay for. And so you can see that this is a fully managed cloud service. So who is using... There we go. Well, before I get to who's using, let me talk about a little bit more about this fully managed service. I like this chart a lot because it kind of shows the difference between having the on-premise VDI and, as you migrate to a cloud offering. We provide a fully cloud managed VDI service at global scale, reliability, and availability. So we believe that you've got to do more than manage servers just to be agile. With our virtual applications and desktop offerings, the complexity is abstracted to enable your IT staff to look at being able to be accessible to do other business value related activities. Because as we are managing more of this for our customers, you simply manage your users. You manage your users and your applications and your images, but we manage the rest. And so this allows us to be able to get contractors and remote employees and contact centers up and running very quickly. So who's using our services? Well, we have tens of thousands of customers, and we have hundreds of thousands of users. And we have companies, larger enterprise companies like Amazon. We have small mid-market companies. We have verticals. We have different industries. As you can see here, we've got finance and retail, state and local governments, universities, manufacturing. We have almost every vertical covered with all the different customers that are using the Amazon Workspaces and Amazon AppStream 2.0. And in fact, Jason Winters is here from Maximus to tell us about how Maximus is using Amazon end-user computing services for call center agents. So Jason?
Thank you. Thank you, Carla. Get this here. Okay. I'm going to start by kind of telling a backstory of our kind of foray into workspaces, Amazon Workspaces. In 2018, Maximus IT adopted a cloud-first strategy with the goal to move all of our systems to the cloud. We chose AWS as our primary cloud provider. Much of our business revolves around call centers for local, state, federal agencies. So we had approximately 3,000 users using our on-prem based and locally managed VMware Horizon VDI system. Moving our users from the local VMware VDI system to the cloud meant cost savings by not renewing VMware license, but also saving us operational costs by sunsetting our internal VMware infrastructure. In early 2020, we were given a deadline, January 2021, to completely sunset our VDI system and get all users moved to the new platform. So we started investigating AWS Workspaces as it was the most logical next step. And we were heavily invested in AWS as our cloud provider already. So we then made a goal to move those 3,000 users over 6 months' time, ending in about October, November of 2020. Then, of course, we all know what happened next. COVID-19 pandemic hits. Offices are closing. Users are forced to work from home. We had to think fast and devise a strategy that would allow us to accelerate our goal exponentially. We had to get people back to work fast. And due to our efforts, we were able to move over 16,000 people to AWS Workspaces in less than 3 months, cutting 3 months off of our original goal and moving more than 5 times as many users. So you may ask, how did we do that? At first, we were interested in using the Bring Your Own License, the BYOL images, so that we could maintain a single image for VDI, laptop, desktop, and also take advantage of less expensive licensing. However, when we needed to scale the BYO workspaces to large numbers, we found there was a significant delays in approvals, wait time, while AWS had to build new infrastructure for us due to the fact that BYOL workspaces live on their own dedicated hardware. We were limited in our ability to scale. So because of this, we decided to go with the standard AWS workspace image, customize that image to bring it to the Maximus standard. Using the standard image allowed us to scale at unprecedented levels, adding as many workspaces as we needed in a short amount of time. Our new image process kind of works like this. We have new images that are first preloaded with our standard tools prior to deployment as a workspace. Then we update the image with the latest patches from Microsoft, install common tool software like Adobe Acrobat Reader, Firefox, Chrome, and as well as install software patching and distribution agents like BigFix and SCCM clients. We have an automated Python script that runs in the background, runs on a management server that moves the workspaces to their proper OU and Active Directory based on project-specific tags after they've been deployed. Now we limit the size of our directories to 1,000 users, or /22 subnet. Now this number was not really just chosen at random. There were a lot of factors that fell into this. One of the most important ones was we wanted to have the ability to make changes and do maintenance in smaller chunks instead of kind of a big bang that would affect all users at once. Also, being able to limit the amount of traffic through firewalls and things like that. We could scale our firewalls to directories and things like that. We use CloudFormation templates that were built to create the VPCs and directories as required, as well as all the supporting infrastructure like Route 53 resolvers, transit gateway attachments, and security groups. These tied in with other scripted CLI commands to finish up the final details of the workspace directory like directory settings and MFA configuration, made deployment of new directories fast and consistent. An entire new directory ready to deploy workspaces could be created in a matter of minutes. Internet egress for all the directories are all directed to a single egress point per region using a gateway load balancer that we can stack redundant firewalls behind between the user and the internet. Then also force point agents do URL filtering direct on the workspaces. And all directories are set up for secure access using multi-factor authentication. Today, we're supporting about 40,000 workspaces in 3 regions and continue to win new contracts to build new call centers. Our cloud engineering team supports a continuous development and improvement lifecycle for our products. So how do we manage this growth? That's really the story of our advancements in large-scale workspace deployment and management. At Maximus, we knew we needed an automated solution to help us manage the scale of our workspace's footprint. No one could have predicted just how large the workspace's footprint was going to grow. But we knew automation would help us and deliver in a consistent and expedient way for our customers. In a call center environment, we understand it's not uncommon for projects to experience high employee turnover. We wanted to be able to remove unused workspaces as quickly as possible to save costs, but we also wanted to have workspaces deployed practically in sync with the new employee onboarding so that resources could be available to them day one for training. Some contracts we win also have a very short runway, so we needed to be able to deploy hundreds, if not thousands, of workspaces at a moment's notice. As we started thinking about this, we considered the different deployment patterns that we might have. We started out building workspaces for just our IT teams before rolling them out to the company. And we knew we wanted to restrict those workspaces to specific target directories. That would allow us to easily leverage legacy IP-based security controls on other systems and ensure elevated access was only coming from those internal IP ranges or via expected security stacks. Another pattern might address users impacted by international regulations, such as GDPR, and understanding they may be working with data that must remain in specific regions. And finally, you of course need to pattern for your standard user deployment. So we wanted our selected automation solution to be able to deploy workspaces according to these patterns in a way that also doesn't exponentially scale the amount of management and administrative overload that would for our provisioning team for these. Click. So as we started on their workspaces journey, we engaged a third party to provide these automation tools. Amazon's partnered with several companies that provide Amazon workspaces, automation and management. However, a few issues quickly emerged as we became one of the largest consumer of workspaces that this partner had ever worked with at the time. The first issue was the provisioning of workspaces across multiple directories and AWS accounts. We leveraged Active Directory user and group management to control which employees are provisioned workspaces for different projects. So within our partner's management system, you would configure the launch parameters for a workspace, select the appropriate AD group, and everyone in that group would get a workspace. Unfortunately, during this kind of configuration, you're limited to a single build directory. So it made the management of available IP address within these directories difficult to manage because as we'd have to closely monitor the number of people in these AD groups, and if they were over a certain size, we have to split them down into multiple AD groups to multiply into different directories. So this was incredibly time-consuming. It was error-prone and it was inefficient. Another issue was that quickly emerged was a limitation of 500 grants per AWS KMS key. Now, this issue actually has been solved by AWS, but it was a problem at the time, so I'd like to kind of talk about it. Where they used to encrypt the storage for their workspaces. Our partner had no system to monitor the usage of these KMS key grants, and workspace provisioning would fail if that limit was reached. So we had to manage these keys manually. It further complicated the administration. And finally, as we grew, we started experiencing issues with API throttling. The product we used directly, referenced the Workspaces API to do management. And as we had more and more users come on, the more these things were throttled by AWS. And looking at the CloudTrail data that we were actually seeing coming back from our partner that was generating, we said we can probably do better. So because of these issues and more, we ultimately decided to craft our own automation platform and management solution. By building something in-house, we were able to ensure it fit our use case perfectly, and we were able to iterate on our solution much faster than any other external partner who has other customers to contend with. We consulted with our AWS TAMs, and through their encouragement, we charged full speed ahead. There are several AWS blog posts around automating the provisioning of workspaces and the creation of a self-service portal that are available for reference, which is a link on the page there. That help us jumpstart the process. So here's how we solve those issues. First, our automation platform does not reference specific directories to provision workspaces. Instead, we leverage tags on the workspace directories to group them together based upon their build platform. Directories that align on security posture, access needs, build type, et cetera, they would be tagged with the same category. And those tag values would then be referenced in our build parameters. For example, the build details for IT employee AD groups references that those workspaces must be built in specific directories. If we require more directories down the line, we just build a new directory with the CFTs, tag it with that appropriate category, and then it's immediately available for the workspaces for those specific groups. Second, we completely abstracted the KMS key usage for our build parameters. Instead, we have a whole separate automation system that tracks a pool of the KMS keys and their usage, and can inform our workspace's provisioning automation which key has the least uses and to use that one. As keys are used up, we can create more on demand and never worry about reaching that 500 grants per KMS key limit, which of course, again, is not a limit anymore, but it was at the time. Finally, we needed to tackle the API throttling issue. This was probably the biggest one. In hindsight, we should have investigated spreading our workspaces over multiple accounts sooner. But since we had already developed the deployment patterns, the tag-based identification directories, this would have been trivial. However, even now, we're still able to keep this under control as we surpass 20,000 workspaces within a single region and account. We do this primarily two ways via our custom-built front end we call Cloud Factory. Number one, we maintain an up-to-date database of our workspaces fleet with an AWS-managed Elasticsearch cluster. As long as we keep that data current, we can query it as much as we'd like instead of making describe calls against the API. We leverage a combination of CloudTrail event tracking, targeted workspace describe calls for those in a changing state, and sanity check crawling of the environment just to ensure that it never falls behind. For mutable actions, we make calls against our own API first, and our system is aware of all the workspace API's calls against AWS. So it makes a best effort attempt to batch up similar API calls and then handles that retry functionality for the user. Because of the abstraction tools that we've built, we're able to approach a multi-account workspaces fleet, and the perception of administration of those workspaces doesn't change for the administrators at all. So this is kind of a flow diagram, simplified, that kind of represents the most important bits and pieces relevant to our workspace provisioning process. Just to call out a few components, number one at the top there, we have a DynamoDB table that stores the workspace configuration parameters for each AD group. Each item in this table identifies an AD group as well as what directory category it should deploy to, and any other relevant data like compute type, drive size, project billing tags, things like that. Number two is a Lambda function that is fed those AD group configurations, and it compares the users that are part of that group with those who currently have a workspace. Information on that workspace fleet is stored in Dynamo, so we don't need to query the workspace API constantly. We just go back and query the database whenever we need information. When the Lambda finds discrepancies, then it can create, provision, and terminate jobs in Dynamo to be picked up by the step function depicted by number 3. So by the time the job gets to the step function, all the decisions about this specific workspace and where it needs to go have already been made. Earlier Lambdas have selected what directory it should go in, what key to encrypt it with, et cetera. All the step function has to do is fire off a create workspaces API call and monitor for that workspace to become available. When it sees that it's available, it goes and sends a welcome email to the user with a registration code and some other information. Not depicted in this diagram are some of the follow-up steps that take place depending on the project the workspace is a part of. Our workspaces are all tagged with project name, and after the workspace is built, we have additional automation that moves the computer object in AD to the appropriate OU, and then things like group policy take care of application deployments or BigFix or SCCM that are specific for that project. All in all, Maximus's Cloud Factory application and our engineers' commitment to automation with CLI CloudFormation were all keys to our success in managing our unprecedented workspaces scale-up. I'd also like to give a big thanks and shout out to John Farinelli, who was one of our top engineers and key in developing Cloud Factory for us. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Jason, for sharing your journey with workspaces and sharing your Cloud Factory solution with our audience. So as we can see from the Maximus use case, agility and adopting to new ways to work are key. And Amazon's end-user computing services help IT practitioners simplify those deployment and ongoing management mechanisms for those end-user systems and virtual applications, and for those virtual desktops in ways that give you benefits over those traditional on-premises solutions. We have pre-configured instances tailored for workloads, from basic productivity apps to high-end graphics and high-performance compute. We provide a variety of auto-scale policies for scaling up and scaling down controls based on capacity utilization or schedule with Amazon AppStream 2.0. And we provide administrators with real-time usage, performance logging, and monitoring of the workspaces and AppStream environments by using AWS CloudWatch. More specifically, CloudWatch can give you metrics such as workspace availability, the health of your workspaces and your directories, connection and disconnection activity across workspaces or AppStream environments. And having that capacity and usage reporting across all of your fleets is really useful for understanding your capacity planning and your business needs. Lastly, we provide customers with the ability to streamline those common workflows with APIs, as you saw with the Maximus example, and that allows administrators to automate user self-service requests, provisioning requests, image creation and deletion, instance start and stop, and most importantly, the ability to restore or rebuild workspace operations and scale at unprecedented speeds when needed. Additionally, Amazon desktops and applications can easily extend and integrate with popular third-party systems, application management systems, service management portals like ServiceNow, and we work with common tools that you may already be familiar with today, so System Center or Liquidware or just general Active Directory integration on our Windows systems. The AWS End User Computing Services just really help you facilitate the needs of your workforce. So when you're choosing between Amazon Workspaces and Amazon AppStream 2.0, you need to think about your users' needs and keep some of these features in mind. With Amazon Workspaces, a user gets their own persistent desktop running either Amazon Linux or Windows 10 experience. It is the same instance every time that named user logs on. The user customizations persist between logins, and that can include additional applications that the user installs beyond what you provide in the base image, whether that's through giving them elevated permissions to do their own installs, or through a software catalog where they can customize to their specific needs for whatever their function might be. Workspaces are managed like traditional desktops or laptops. A workspace is deployed ahead of time for a named user. Now, with Amazon AppStream 2.0, it's a non-persistent experience, with a new instance every time your user connects or every time a new user logs in. In desktop view, a user will still have that familiar full desktop experience, but in application view, a user will see the applications that you have published to them to make available for their use. Only admin-chosen customizations will persist between logins, and that's generally going to be scoped to user data or application configuration settings. AppStream instances are managed more like a kiosk than a traditional endpoint, and they're deployed with the expectation, with the model of usage by multiple users, not necessarily known names ahead of time, right? Those instances are not provisioned based on named users. They are attached, as soon as a user logs in, they attach to a running instance, something that is available in your fleet. So let's talk about some of the things that we've released this last month. Well, this was a little earlier than this month, but to help you and your teams select the right solutions for your users, we've recently launched 4 EUC-focused courses through Skill Builder. It's comprised of 23 modules covering various aspects of workspaces and AppStream deployments. These digital training courses are now up on Skill Builder, and we're working to make them available in additional languages over the coming months. So you can find these by going to skillbuilder.aws and filtering on the domain end user computing. The introductory course is an intro to Amazon end user computing services. It gives you sort of an overview and selection criteria between when you would choose workspaces or when you would choose AppStream. And then we have a primer for both workspaces and AppStream that goes into just fundamental setup and configuration of your initial fleet, general usage of the products. And this is all administrator-focused training. This is not end-user training. This is not how do I connect to my workspace. This is how do you build and decide on capacity and figure out your networking, all of the fundamental things that you would need to build on a Workspaces or AppStream 2.0 based solution. And we have a deep dive that goes even further into some of the monitoring and additional considerations behind workspaces. So our recent releases in the EUC space. Earlier this month on November 19th, we announced Elastic Fleets. This is a new serverless fleet type in Amazon AppStream 2.0 that eliminates the need for instance provisioning and capacity planning for our customers. Elastic Fleets eliminate any needs to do that modeling of your peak capacity. With Elastic Fleets, your users can stream applications and desktops from an AWS-managed pool of streaming instances. AWS manages the capacity of EC2 instances without any input or guidance from you. We designed Elastic Fleets for customers with unpredictable usage patterns, such as ISVs who want to transform their desktop application into a web-based SaaS without rewriting it, right? So they use virtual hard drives that are stored in an S3 bucket in your account. And when a user selects an application to launch from the catalog, AppStream 2.0 will assign that instance from the pool of available streaming instances, and then that VHD is mounted for that system. The application the user needs is launched, and a user can operate as they normally would, without you needing to build a pre-existing image for that system, right? You're building the VHD, but you're not managing it as an image builder in our traditional AppStream 2.0 model. With Elastic Fleets, we're bringing the benefits of serverless computing to desktop applications. Customers no longer need to manage that capacity, predict usage, or create images to provision streaming instances before users need them. And because you no longer need to provision or manage capacity, billing for Elastic Fleets is per second for the duration of the streaming session, with the rate based on the instance type, instance size, and operating system. Customers only pay for what their end users are using in seconds, specifically when those end users are active. Because Elastic Fleets charge only for the duration of the streaming session, we expect that customers will be able to reduce their costs compared to the same instance type and size for always-on or on-demand fleets. And just yesterday, we announced Amazon Workspaces Web. This is a new browser-based workspace built specifically to facilitate web-based workloads. It is a low-cost, fully managed workspace built to deliver a managed web browser to your employees to give access to internal websites and software-as-a-service implementations without the administrative burden of managing appliances or specialized client software. Amazon Workspaces Web provides simple policy tools tailored for user interaction while offloading common tasks like capacity management, scaling, and maintaining browser images. Corporate data never reaches, much less resides, on an unmanaged device or a remote device. Websites are rendered in an isolated container in AWS and pixel streamed to the user. This isolated browsing session will give an effective barrier between corporate services and user devices that, as we all know, are never really completely trusted or secure. Workspaces Web supports enterprise controls that will allow you to set browser policies that can be enabling and disabling extensions, allow and deny specific URLs, and 300 other user data policies from Chrome for Enterprise. User settings like the ability to access the clipboard, to transfer files one way or another, or to use local printer controls are also in your administrative control. And when the session is complete, that browser instance is terminated, ensuring no sensitive corporate web content ever gets outside of your enterprise control. You can also secure browser traffic for your users on networks without open internet access, so enabling that safe browsing on the public internet with an effective barrier against attacks that might be packaged in web content lets you set user-level controls and really helps protect your infrastructure and your users' endpoints from other types of threats by containerizing that access. Users are able to access from any desktop or tablet to your internal web services that you've made available through the network routing, and you can maintain enterprise control over that company IP with that custom browser policy. You can really turn this service on and off like a light switch. That was a fundamental part of the design, right? AWS manages the capacity, the scaling. We automatically update the latest browser version. We offload management of the streaming instances to free up your resource time to work on more important projects. You no longer have to qualify or specify an instance. You don't have to size your fleet. You don't have to create and manage complex scaling rules to predict your usage. Admins really enjoy a set it and forget it experience. And we've optimized the costs to further lower the administrative burden by basing pricing on monthly active users with no upfront commitments or contracts. Your customers are only charged, you're only charged for users who actually use the service each month. Our EUC computing services are available in 14 of our 25 worldwide regions, so you can easily deploy your virtual desktops and applications to a global audience. As always, we talk about when do you design your infrastructure to have your desktops closer to your users, or do you design your infrastructure to have your desktops closer to your backend data? Generally, you're going to get better performance by focusing on keeping those desktops closer to the data, and your users can be located anywhere in the world. We have very performant protocols to operate wherever your users may be. And if you're having trouble getting started or you need some additional assistance, we have an extensive selection of partners in the Amazon Partner Network with the AWS Digital Workplace Competency. The APN partners provide services and offerings around the world to help customers with strategy, professional services, managing information, protecting intellectual property, and optimizing for end-user computing technologies on AWS. To learn more about our AWS Partner Network, check out our Digital Workplace Competency partners at aws.amazon.com/partners. Some of them are up here on the slides. And if you're interested and want to learn more, you can always schedule a deep dive for your use case with your account manager, connect with an AWS Digital Workplace Competency partner, or schedule an immersion day with your team. Also, check out that Workspaces and Amazon AppStream 2.0 training on skillbuilder.aws. That is not only customer-facing training. I developed that training to be able to be used to onboard our solutions architects, to onboard our specialists, and to train our field. So we use that training internally, and we've made it all available to our customers. So thank you. Thanks to my co-presenters. We will be available for some questions afterwards.